The world thought it understood the Carters. Power, perfection, predictability. But then everything changed. Quiet moves, unseen battles, shifts that no one saw coming. And the biggest shock isn't what they did, but why they did it. For years, Beyoncé and Jay-Z were seen as untouchable giants, gliding above the music industry with effortless grace. But the truth is far more complex. Behind the glamorous red carpets and flawless performances, a storm was forming. Not a public scandal, not a tabloid feud, something deeper, strategic, calculated, a silent confrontation with an industry that had underestimated them for the last time. It started with whispers, meetings cancelled without explanation, collaborations quietly dropped, projects paused without notice. But these weren't signs of retreat. They were preparation, a pause before a leap. Because the Carters were building something the industry wasn't ready for. To understand the shockwave of this year, you have to go back. Back to the early days, when Beyoncé was still fighting for full creative control, and Jay-Z was building a business empire no one believed could succeed. They had always pushed against barriers, but this time, the walls they were breaking were far bigger. The first move came quietly. Beyoncé began shifting her creative work behind the scenes, partnering only with people who respected her vision without compromise. No leaked drafts, no early teasers. Every recording session became a fortress. Every document was guarded. Rumors spread inside the industry. Something big was coming, but no one knew what direction she was aiming toward. Then Jay-Z made his own unexpected turn. Instead of expanding his business outward, he started pulling inward. Restructuring companies, ending deals that seemed profitable from the outside but were draining control from the inside. Insiders called it reckless, but it wasn't reckless. It was intentional. He wasn't chasing more, he was reclaiming what already belonged to them. And in the center of all of this was their family. The next generation. Their children growing older, stepping into a world already obsessed with them. The Carters understood something that the industry forgot. Legacy isn't built with fame. It's built with ownership, protection, and intention. The pressure around them grew. Some executives grew nervous. Some partners grew impatient. Quiet attempts were made to pull them back in line. To lure them into deals with flashy promises. To remind them of the industry rules. But the Carters were done following rules made by systems designed to limit them. With every move they made, another curiosity opened. Why was Beyoncé turning down global offers that any artist would dream of? Why was Jay-Z restructuring businesses that already seemed successful? Why were the Carters disappearing more often, choosing silence instead of visibility? Because they weren't stepping back. They were building forward. Then the real shock came. A project unlike anything they'd ever done. A project that blended music, film, business, culture, and legacy into a single vision. Not a surprise album, not a tour, something bigger, something that required a level of independence no major label would ever allow. Something that shifted the balance of power. The industry realized too late that the Carters weren't just creating art. They were creating a new blueprint. As the truth began to leak, reactions spread fast. Some insiders panicked. Some tried to block certain elements from moving forward. Some attempted to take credit. Others tried to slow the momentum. But none of it worked. Because the Carters weren't negotiating from fear. They were negotiating from strength. And the more resistance they faced, the more determined they became. Suddenly, Beyoncé's silence began to make sense. Jay-Z's restructuring had a purpose. Their absence from certain events wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. They had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. But even with their power, the emotional weight was heavy. Long nights, difficult decisions, family conversations about legacy and privacy. Moments when they wondered if the world would understand what they were trying to do. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the artists who had been silenced. The culture that had been exploited. The next generation watching their every step. And then it happened. Their reveal wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was elegant, intentional, royal. A simple message to the world. They were no longer operating within the industry. They were operating above it. The music world trembled. Streaming giants recalculated their strategies. Labels scrambled to adjust. Artists whispered about following their path. Because the Carters had just broken a cycle that had been unbreakable for decades. But the story doesn't end there. Because every answer they provided created a new question. If they could do this without the industry, what else could they build? What new space could they open for others? What would this mean for their future projects, their family, and their legacy? The shock wasn't a single moment. It was a series of moves. One after another, each more stunning than the last. Moves that changed how the industry
Not just
operated.
musicians,
Moves that
but
proved power
architects
isn't given.
of an American
It's taken,
empire.
protected, reclaimed. As the year unfolded, the world began to understand the truth. The Carters didn't challenge the industry accidentally. They challenged it out of love. For art, for freedom, for each other, for their children, for everyone who ever felt controlled by systems that weren't built for them. And as their influence continues to rise, one question remains. If this is what they accomplished this year, what comes next? The camera fades to black.